Hey everybody, this is Thalia, and you're listening to Ambiance podcast.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to Ambiance podcast. Sitting to the right of me, I got Thalia Ayres Randolph. That's how you say it, right?
No.
Oh, wow! I butchered it right off the bat. So it's Thalia Ayres?
Yeah. So my name is Thalia Ayres Randolph, and my business name is Air Nouveau.
Air Nouveau. Okay. So where does the meaning Air Nouveau come from?
So essentially, Ayres is my middle name, and it's one of my ancestors' maiden names. So that's where the name originally came from when my parents named me with my middle name. And then as I started to kind of look deeper into the meaning of my middle name, I never growing up. I always just looked into like my first name, like what does my first name mean? And then as I started getting into numerology and different stuff like that, birth charts, where you have to include your middle name, I'm like, actually, I should look into what my middle name means as well. And so heirs means heir to a great fortune. And heirs paired with nouveau is essentially the new heir. So kind of me, my brand, and everything that I represent is this birth of a new generation of heirs that are discovering their fortune within.
Wow.
Not without.
Yeah. So are your parents really spiritually conscious as well then, since they gave you that middle name?
Yeah,
Okay.
they are. I don't even think they knew the meaning though, essentially. It was really just like, this is my great-grandmother's maiden name.
Okay.
Yeah.
At what age did you start seeking more meaning behind your name?
I want to say maybe in 2015.
Okay.
Around that time is when I started to actually research like what is the meaning of my middle name. Before that, for whatever reason, I was just never that curious. I didn't really think it had a meaning.
Yeah.
I just thought it was like a last name.
Yeah. Well, better late than never, you know? Yeah, so to give the audience a little bit of background, Thalia is a multidisciplinary healer, right? And you're involved in many different aspects of meditation and spiritual healing. And we first met about a week ago over at Joe's 500th Selection radio show. And I told you this off camera, but I feel like you had this sense of calmness and peace about you. That was my first impression of you. So I already knew that like you must have had this incredible journey that led you to the person that you are today. So I'm really excited to get into that amazing journey that I'm talking about. So yeah, let's start from the beginning. When you were younger, you mentioned that you've had parents that are really spiritually conscious. What type of qualities did they instill in you when you were a young child growing up in Toronto, Canada, right?
Yeah, in Toronto. My grandmother on my mother's side and my mother both practiced yoga. So that was my initial introduction to spirituality as a way of life and a way of being. And for me, I would say through my mother, the greatest thing was watching her devotion, how yoga was a devotional practice and a daily practice every morning. First thing in the morning, she would get up, she would do yoga, she would meditate, she would journal, she would have her books nearby, and she always just had that time for herself, playing calming music. And so I admire my mother so much, and I wanted to copy everything that she did. So that was kind of like my initial introduction into this whole realm of the healing arts and spirituality. And my father comes from a deeply religious background. His family is Baptist, and I come from a long line of Baptist ministers. I have family members that founded churches in the South, so Christianity was definitely a big part of my upbringing as well. And it was more so watching my dad's relationship to God that really inspired me, and his own faith that has been such an example in my life of how to stay the course, of how to stay committed, of how to stay strong, how to stay optimistic, how to stay peaceful. I feel like those are all qualities that he has through his faith, and so that is and still is really inspiring to me in terms of qualities that I'm like, okay, I need to stay dedicated to my practice so that I can be like him.
Yeah. So with that kind of upbringing on both sides with your mom and your dad, did you notice something different about you in relation to maybe other kids, or maybe in your adolescence years? Did you notice like a difference between you as far as your consciousness and just your mental state of being?
Very much so. Like, I grew up just being really introverted and shy. I didn't talk a lot. I was always very nervous and just kind of like closed in this little shell, but very observant and present. And I knew that, my upbringing, the way I was raised, my family is also in the musical theater business. So,
Okay.
I was just constantly growing up around just all like very bohemian, eclectic, group of people that my parents surround themselves with. And so that also coupled with, their deep spirituality, I feel like now we're at a time where like, people are less religious, people are define themselves as more spiritual. So I just feel like a lot of the things, kind of the paradox of like religion, but then also entertainment industry and, like being exposed to all kinds of people, when friends would come around my house growing up, it would definitely be very different than when I went to other people's homes.
Yeah.
Like I was just exposed to a lot. And my parents are just extremely accepting of all kinds of people. So I grew up with them having trans friends, from before I even knew what these words were. I already knew people. So
That's so awesome.
yeah, it was never something that I had to kind of like learn about and inform myself later on. It was just kind of like from birth. They had a very queer, group of friends and circle, and yeah, it was different.
So you were born into like an open-minded environment, and that helped shape you at a very young age. That's like a blessing to have. Not a lot of people get to have that experience growing up, right?
Yeah, I mean, it made it easy because I'm queer as well. So it's like it made it easy when I first, came out to my family as queer and let them know. I still had my own fears because of society and that sort of thing. But, my parents were always extremely supportive of me and my journey and accepting me, for who I am in all ways. So, yeah, they're special people.
That's
for
such
sure.
a blessing.
Yeah, and I appreciate it. The older, when I was younger, I didn't really appreciate it as much because I didn't know, how lucky and blessed I was to, I just thought, oh, like this is normal. But then as you kind of start to be around other people's family and their dynamics, you start to realize, I really realize how lucky I am and how special. And I'm just so happy that, whatever that higher power is, chose these people for me.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So at that time, when you realized that your upbringing may be a little bit different than other people's, did it make you feel more of like an outlier, or did it make you feel like you were grateful and lucky to have the parents that you did? Like, what were your feelings at that time? I know you're grateful right now, but at that time, how are you feeling?
At that time, I definitely felt like an outlier. I felt so different. I was also, I went through a lot of different phases growing up. Like I used to be like one of those emo punk rock.
Oh, really?
Yeah, like that was my vibe in high school. And
Hot Topic and
like I was just very much into anything that was alternative and different. I didn't want to ever be a part of anything that was super mainstream. Like I just as I started to get older, I started to own kind of like my quirkiness more and more. And so then I definitely kind of like leaned into that. And I was just like, I want to go to the polar opposite. I don't want to do anything that the other kids are doing. I just want to do my own thing. And I hung out, like I was around adults a lot. So I just felt like even just connecting with people, or kids my age, it was kind of tough, because I preferred hanging out with people who were older than me. So I was definitely kind of like an outsider within like people who were my own, age range in high school and younger too. But then, as I got older, I'm just kind of like, I'm so happy that that's how everything kind of panned out.
Yeah, for sure. And at what age did you start to be more comfortable with the way you were?
I mean, I would say fully not until I was like 20 years old is when I feel like I started coming into myself and, being more confident. I went through some difficult years from the 4th grade up until the 8th grade where I was just really badly bullied in elementary and middle school. And so that's kind of like what initially really put me in my shell. And then kind of in high school was more so just like being as loud in terms of like my presence as possible, of being really out there. I always had different color hair. I always did really crazy makeup. And then it wasn't until after high school that I kind of really started to settle into myself and who I am.
Yeah, it's such a weird phase that people go through like in their younger years. Everybody has their own journey, but we're all just trying to figure out like who we are at some point, and we all that time comes at a different time for all of us, right? Like some people don't find out who they really are until the late 20s or maybe their 30s, or like you when you're 20, you know what I mean? So I think it's a blessing that you even found out who you really were like at the age of 20, because everybody's journey, like I said, is a lot different.
Well, I wouldn't say I knew exactly who I am. I think it's a constant process, of unfolding, but when I hit that age of 20, that's when I started to get more serious and curious about starting this process of figuring out who am I, who is just the authentic Thalia, stripping away the hair, stripping away the makeup, stripping away the clothes, like, who am I beneath all of that?
So that's when you started the journey of trying to figure out who you really were. Got it. So at this point, was this the same time where you kind of started the same journey of trying to be a multidisciplinary healer as well?
Yeah, it was. So it was a couple years after that. So or I guess the following year. So when I turned 21, about 6 months later, I quit my job. I was working for my family business, and I decided really on a whim to move to Cape Town, South Africa.
Wow.
And I really just wanted to be in a place where no one knew me, who I was completely anonymous, and I just wanted to see what would happen, who would be the people that I would attract, what experiences would I attract in a place where no one knew me. Like growing up in Toronto, it's such a small city in a lot of ways, and everyone knows each other, especially if you're like born and raised there, and like when I lived in Canada, I didn't even know how to drive. I didn't have a car. Like everything was in biking, like a 2-mile radius that I did. So I really wanted to just kind of get away from everything I knew and go somewhere completely different. And so that's kind of how I landed on South Africa. There was no real plan. I didn't know any people out there.
Well, what made you pick South Africa over like another place where you could do kind of the same thing?
I don't even really have the answer to that. It was kind of like, at first I was looking at Argentina because I used to do Latin ballroom.
Okay.
And compete in salsa. So, I was really fascinated by, maybe I should go to Argentina and, learn tango from there. And that was kind of like what started the ball rolling of me looking into places to go to. But for whatever reason, I just never really booked that ticket. I just never went for it. And I wanted to be somewhere where it was super warm. I knew I wanted to be around a city, but then still have like natural beauty and nature and mountains and ocean. And then I don't know what it was. Maybe it was a calling. But one day I just had the thought to Google South Africa. And I started seeing photos of Cape Town. And just from seeing like those generic touristy photos, like aerial view of Cape Town, I was like, this is where I have to be. Like, this is where I want to go. I don't know why, but
was it scary for you at that time?
No,
Wasn't?
It wasn't. I mean, I love traveling alone, and before that, like I had studied abroad 2 times,
Okay.
by myself. So I felt ready, I felt like at that point it wasn't my first time going away super far for a long period of time. So yeah, I was just kind of excited to dive in.
Yeah. What type of person were you when you went into that experience, and what type of person did you leave as?
I basically just wanted to find clarity. So I was the same old me, but I just didn't have strong direction in, what my purpose was. I was following the path of being within the musical theater industry. I wanted to be like a Broadway performer. I was really good at tap, and these were all hobbies that really were like therapy for me growing up. But then once I got out into the industry after college, I was just so unhappy and I couldn't figure out why. So that was kind of the catapult that made me make the move, because I thought, here I am. I've been doing performing arts my whole life from like the age of 4, and that's what I went to school for, and now I'm in the industry. Like, why aren't I happy? Why am I still feeling kind of empty inside? And so that's when I kind of knew, okay, I need to make a change. I need to kind of strip all this away and see after this journey, like, if I still want to do that. And so essentially through my time there, most of it was spent alone in the beginning, just doing daily meditation, yoga. I was there also under the guidance of my Reiki master.
What is that for people who don't know?
So Reiki is a Japanese energy healing modality. And so Reiki just translates into universal life force energy. And so this universal life force energy is in the air that we breathe. It's around all of us, and every single person has the ability to be a Reiki master just by being a living, breathing, alive being or whatever.
Wow, I could be one.
You could be one. Yeah, you
could be one too.
Yeah, everyone has an energy anatomy, and it's just about learning about it and learning how to harness that energy. And so with Reiki, I'm basically doing energy work on other people and helping them to find energetic balance within themselves and all their energy centers. But that's a whole other
a whole nother topic.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted to kind of get back to my spiritual practice, on what I was raised with, on the practices that I knew helped me. Like anytime I was stressed out or going through something growing up, I would always lean on yoga. I started taking yoga classes in high school. One of my friend's moms also owns a really popular yoga studio in Toronto. So I just feel like just having this easy access, to these spaces was kind of crucial in me finding my way.
Yeah. So you leaned on these practices to make yourself feel more humble and grounded in a place where you didn't know many people, right?
Yeah. And I just wanted to create that deeper, mind, body, spirit connection. I brought so many books with me. I was just reading and soaking in as much as possible. And I didn't really know what I was really looking for, but I just knew that I would feel ready to come back to North America. It would just be an inner knowing of like, okay, the time is now and I'm going to go back. And so that's kind of what happened. One day in meditation, I had this really profound awakening moment that a lot of people talk about, like their awakening, and it can feel very elusive and like, how do I understand, what an awakening is? But awakening is just an opening, an inner knowing to the deeper universal truths that are out there. And so one of those truths is that we are each love. We are all beings of love, and just having that profound realization, feeling it in every cell in the body, that's all we are. And feeling the connection, feeling this sense of interbeing with the planet, with all animals, to all the elements, to all of nature, to every person. That was kind of like the realizations that I started to really feel and embody through my meditation practice. And from there, it just gave me this kind of, in my mind, it was a clear sense of direction, but when I came home, when I was ready to come home, when I was like, okay, I got it, you know, like
So
I
when
know
you
what
when
I'm
you
here.
when you got that, you're like, I'm ready to go home now.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
It was like that was a feeling. I was like, I just wanted to feel purpose, you know. I wanted to feel like there was more to life than just working and making money, you know. I was like, that is not it.
Yeah.
That's not it at all.
Yeah.
There's
And I
so
think,
much.
sorry to cut you off, but I think there's so many people that are stuck in that process, and there may be people that are listening or watching right now that are stuck in that type of rut in their life. And everybody's searching for happiness in their own way and peace in their own way. So what would you say to somebody who's kind of in that rut that you were just explaining? Like how would they seek guidance to get out of it?
For me, it's been books. So I'm a reader. I love books, and just reading as much as possible about spirituality, you know, the spiritual journey. There's a lot of different books that I've read that have just helped to inspire these realizations, you know, within myself, and to realize that I'm not alone. Every person goes through this process, you know,
Yeah.
but at different points throughout their life, and it's never too late, you know, like I talk a lot about the planetary shift that happened in 2012. There was a lot of buzz that year about the Mayan calendar
Yeah.
and it ending, and there just being this rebirth of something new. And with people that I talked to who were more senior to me, there would sometimes be this underlying sentiment of feeling like why did they wait so long? Why are they a late bloomer? You know, but I'm like, there's no such thing as a late bloomer. This shift happened, you know, in this year 2012. So no matter what age you were at that time, that's when you're kind of starting to enter into this new phase, this new chapter that we're in on this planet together, this kind of age of Aquarius, this age of remembering our divine birthright of enlightenment. Yeah.
Isn't that funny how that same year you moved to Cape Town, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, it wasn't planned. I wasn't like, oh, 2012, like, I gotta move. But yeah, for me, like that's also when it happened too. It was just this shift.
Yeah. So to go back to that experience, did you have an idea of how long you were going to stay there, and how long did you stay there?
Yeah, so I didn't have any idea. When it's kind of a funny story, when I landed, the customs officer asked me, and so I was like, oh God, I have to come up with an answer. So I just said a month. You know, I was like,
you did?
a month, yeah. And then he looked at me and he was just like, I think you're going to stay longer. And he stamped my visa for 6 months.
Oh, 6 months?
Yeah. And
Wow.
I was like, okay. And yeah, so I think I ended up staying for 4.
Okay.
I wasn't keeping track, you know, I was really just living moment to moment, day to day, week to week, and just being open with really no set plan.
Yeah. So after you left Cape Town, you mentioned earlier to me off camera that you lived in a few different places in your lifetime. Where was next after Cape Town?
Yeah, so from Toronto, I went to Cape Town, and then after Cape Town, I went back to Toronto just for a few months to kind of, you know, grab my belongings, get my things, get everything situated. And I was in a long distance relationship at the time, and that person is from Arizona.
Okay.
And so I visited there, and one day I came across this yoga studio, and there was this teacher there that I was just completely drawn to. I couldn't really explain it. I had never met her in person before, and the studio happened to be doing a yoga teacher training. So I just decided to enroll. I was like, I'm going to do this yoga teacher training. Like, this is kind of like continuing on, you know, the path that I was just on in South Africa, and I feel like I want to go deeper into my practice. I want to understand the practice of yoga even more. And so I didn't know that I was going to stay, but then after I did my teacher training, I ended up getting a job teaching at the studio that I did my training at and managing it,
wow.
and doing a lot of different things. Yeah, and so that kind of made me just, I was like, okay, I guess I meant to stay. Like, the job has aligned,
So
just showed up.
that was your first introduction to like the professional realm of spiritual healing and becoming...
Not the first.
Not the first?
Yeah, so I haven't talked about my godmother yet, but my godmother has also been someone who is instrumental in, you know, kind of introducing me to more of the esoteric realm of things. She is a shamanic healer. She is also a psychic medium, and she uses the crystal singing bowls. So she's the one who first introduced me to singing bowls and to sound healing and to using that as a practice to bring yourself back into alignment and harmony. So if there was a time growing up where, we were hanging out and I was, expressing to her just like my anxiety and around school and going to school because of bullying, like she did a lot of one-on-one healing sessions with me, and it really, really helped, me just to kind of constantly remember who I am, come back to that state of balance. Because I remember when I was a lot younger, there was many times where I had those thoughts like I didn't want to be here anymore, So she's someone who she's my godmother, but she's also like my guardian angel.
Really? That's how you view it? That's awesome.
Yeah.
So,
my fairy godmother.
Your fairy godmother. She's a lot of things for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. So how does the process work for sound? What's the like correct term for it, first off?
There's a lot of different terms, so it can just be called sound healing.
Sound healing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So for sound healing, how does it work in a sense of the benefits and like when you're doing a session with a group or with an individual, how does it affect somebody when they're going through the process? And can you break down that process for us?
Yeah, so another universal law is the law of vibration, that everything is vibration and everything has a vibration to it. The only reason why you and I can see each other is because we're vibrating at the same frequency, and the material things around us are vibrating at similar frequencies. So that's why we're able to see it. When people are psychic and can see the unseen, they're able to raise their vibration to see things that are vibrating at a higher frequency. And so vibration is so powerful, but a lot of people are so unfamiliar with it, and it just feels kind of like this like physics term, and something that is not deeply felt in our daily lives, this idea of vibration. And so I always start with vibration, of just understanding that everything around us is vibrating. And all the cells in our body respond, or how should I say this? Sound waves move fastest through water. And so since the body is comprised of mostly water, sound has this really powerful effect, the vibration of these natural tones produced from, natural instruments. That's why it's a little different when you hear live music as opposed to a recording, because you're not hearing the pure tone, and the vibration that those instruments are creating are having an effect on your energy anatomy.
Oh, wow.
And so that's why they say, like, playing classical music is really nice for babies, when they're in the womb, because that vibration is moving through the mother, it's moving through the water, that they're growing and living in. And it helps all the cells in your body to remember their correct function or their correct vibration. When our cells forget their correct function and turn malignant, then that's when we start to develop tumors and we have different things that start to happen. And so in many ways, sound healing is a form of preventative medicine, of helping cellular health. And I think cellular health is also a newer area in science and in health and healing that people are starting to investigate. Just the more that science is expanding, where we can start to really see what's going on within the cells of the body. We're also starting to see vibrational sound therapy being used in hospitals as a complementary healing modality for cancer patients. I work with a lot of people who are in different stages along their cancer journey. So it's just, it's really powerful stuff, even though it might seem like, this just sounds cool. Like, there's so many more deeper layers that are going on. And I kind of view it like we're tuning up the human energy anatomy. So like guitars, pianos, different instruments, they go out of tune over time.
Yeah.
And so we have to tune them so that they are aligned back to their correct vibration and frequency, and then they can play in harmony with the other instruments.
That's a great analogy for how it works. That kind of puts the whole explanation together. for me.
There you go.
Yeah, and have you been able to notice the transcendence of it? Because I feel like it's become more popular and more notarized in today's world. Because you're starting to see like even artists kind of tap into it, like SZA or Gina Aiko. I feel like she's been on that for a while, but a lot of people have become more aware to it. Have you noticed that, being that you've kind of been on it a little bit longer than most people?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be something so obscure. It used to be something that you would either only experience in like a Buddhist temple, or it would be something that you would experience in a Hindu temple, or something in a yoga class maybe. There wasn't, sound really wasn't super popular. I think it was really yoga that started to make it more popular because a lot of teachers that I knew growing up always use sound like in their yoga practice. And so when I started teaching yoga, it was kind of like a natural harmony. When after people do their practice, when they're in Shavasana, laying down, for those few moments of meditation, I would always play the singing bowls. And so I think it was out of people, wanting more of that, like
Yeah.
after class, you'd be like, I just want a class of just that. Because sound baths are definitely like a new age thing, like the whole idea of like these crystal bowls, the metal bowls, which are the Himalayan or Tibetan singing bowls. Those have been around for thousands of years, so it's definitely a very ancient and old modality that's been used for a really long time, but not in like the sound bath musical sense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's so many different methods and types of healing. How does one know what they need? You know what I mean, at that time? Because there's so many different types.
Well, it takes exploring, like you have to explore it all. If you're curious about anything and everything, go for it. Read about it, like look, there's so much information online, especially. It takes getting familiar with yourself and what works for you.
Yeah.
Like everyone is different. So what worked for me might not work for someone else, like it all depends. So it's really specific and unique to the individual. If I'm working with someone one-on-one and they're telling me about what's going on in my mind, I can start to be like, okay, like this is what I'm going to do a combination of within, my tools. But yeah, it's a deeply personal experience, and you just have to explore as much as possible and just see what resonates with you. It's an energy you feel. So sometimes people will do a sound bath and they're like, like wasn't for me. I didn't feel that. And sometimes they'll try one, say like 5 years later, and it's like completely different. They're like, oh my God.
So there's exterior factors that come into play then, right? Because
it's also the healer too. It's like finding a therapist. So like,
that's a
say
good point.
once you realize that you like yoga, or once you realize that you're into Reiki or sound or meditation, then you have to go through the process of finding the teacher, the right vessel for you to learn and receive that information through, because each teacher is so different.
Yeah, that's very true. I remember one time, or a couple times, I tried you go in the chamber.
The float deprivation.
Yeah,
tanks?
float deprivation tanks. The first time I did it, I had an hour session and I didn't get anything out of it. And I was talking to people who had hyped it up so much, and they were telling me this is an amazing thing. I came out so refreshed, and they told me all these great benefits about it. So when I came in, I think I just had these like
high expectations.
Like,
I'm going to be awakened.
Exactly. That it almost ruined the experience. So then I came back another time, and during that time, I think I had a lot going on, and I wasn't going in like trying to get something out of it. And also, the owner of the spot put me underneath this table, and he had these lights that were flashing in a certain sequence, and I was listening to this track that like activated the pineal gland with the lights, and then I went in and I had this amazing experience that I'll never forget. So I can see what you're saying. Like it really does, your mind state going into your meditation really does matter, right? Mm-hmm. And it has a huge impact on how what you're gonna take out of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've had sessions. I've done so many sessions over the years. I've been teaching and doing this professionally for 8 years now. So I've kind of like seen it all. I mean, I'm sure there's still more interesting experience out there. There's so many different types of people, but I've definitely had, you know, the type of person or client that comes in and kind of just has this expectation on how things are supposed to go based on other people's experiences.
Yeah.
Or just maybe, like, for example, for a Reiki session, some people think that a Reiki healer is a psychic, you know, and that's a different thing. So
Yeah.
there are some people who come in and are just like, read me, you know?
There's a lot of misconceptions then
Yeah.
about how
Yeah,
it works.
exactly.
Got it. What other healing processes do you do other than what you explained with yoga and with sound healing?
Yeah, so for me, I mean, my personal practice is very much yoga, meditation, Reiki, sound.
Okay.
Being in nature is important. I'm in nature every single day, no matter what. And just taking time for the self, really alone time, like that's all really important to me. I also do acupuncture. I do a lot of massages. Before COVID, I was constantly at Korean bathhouses, just being in water, being in the different saunas. So like just any and all alternative modality, I have to take care of myself so that I can, you know, be of service to other people.
Yeah. What are some of those things that you do to take care of yourself and to make sure that you're in a good mind state to help other people?
Well, I would say, you know, it's all about managing stress and learning how to manage stress. And I had to learn that at a young age. And so I feel like the sooner we can understand when we start to feel stressed and then do the things that, you know, we're curious about or that work for us, like the things that I was mentioning, like being in nature, having massages, getting acupuncture. I love getting tarot card readings. You know, I'm always a student first, so getting into someone else's class so I can just receive. I have to make sure that I am practicing as much as I'm teaching and doing. You know,
Yeah.
there has to be that balance. It can't just all be teaching. You know, there has to be a balance of both. So
Yeah.
I find if I'm in the seat of the teacher, you know, too much of the time, and I'm not taking the time for my own practice, and I'm not taking the time to get into classes myself, especially yoga classes. For me, that is one of the most therapeutic things that I like to do for myself. Then I don't feel balanced. I have to practice what I preach.
And it's always going to be that way, right? Like you're never going to get to a day where it's just like, I've learned enough that I need to know. Like it's a constant journey of your path, right?
Yeah. The more you learn, the less you know. Like, yeah, the universe is constantly expanding, you know, so there's no limit to what we can learn and realize. You know, I think when people have just the experience of oneness, if I'm supposed to simplify it down to something, realizing that you are one with all things, I mean, I guess that could be the ultimate, but experiencing and feeling the different layers of that, that's kind of the constant journey.
Yeah, for sure. You have this saying that goes, the pursuit of enlightenment is every human's birthright, right? So can you break that down for me, what that means?
So depending on where you're from culturally, the idea of enlightenment in the past was exclusive to certain people. In the church, for example, the idea is that the priest is the enlightened one, and he is your kind of medium for accessing God. You know, you need the priest to access God. Or taking it back to yoga, it would be the Brahmins that are allowed to practice yoga, men, you know, and you have to be born, you know, karma, caste system, you have to be born into that upbringing. You have to be born into that life. It's not something that you can choose.
Yeah.
And so there was always this kind of separation between kind of regular people and enlightened people. And there being this barrier of, you know, you needing there to be some type of intermediate person between you and God, you know. And I really feel a part of that is about control. You know, there's a lot of powers out there that don't want people to be enlightened. There's a lot of powers out there that don't want people to realize the infinite power, the infinite love, the infinite wisdom, gratitude, compassion, forgiveness, and healing that's in every single person. That's why we see the greatest political prisoners or the most highly surveillance prisoners are political prisoners, or people who are fighting for change and equality.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I never thought about it that way or viewed it, because I never knew how, I mean, the past always affects the present in some sense, but the way you put it, like, people's information were so limited to like the person that was telling that story. Nowadays, where like internet's out and there's YouTube, there's so many resources that you can really learn about these type of things on your own if you really want to do the research.
Exactly.
So you feel like that path to enlightenment is a lot simpler, right?
Yeah.
In today's world.
It's getting quiet, you know, and people want to know, like, what's the secret concoction? You know, like, what are all the things you have to do? And for me, the main thing is silent meditation, you know, like, you have, there's a saying, you know, in yoga, Om Bolo Shri Sat Guru Bhagavan Ki, that means I honor the greatest teacher of all, and that's the one that lives inside of you. So you have the wisdom of every wise teacher that's ever walked this planet. You have the wisdom of all of the universe inside of you. The universe is literally inside of you. You know, there's no separation from that. And so, but I don't want people to think that there's no importance for elders. You know, it's really important to have elders out there and to have teachers who you can learn from authentically and genuinely, but you want to have a teacher that is wanting to help you, not need them, you know? Like, that's what I tell my clients, is the goal is, it's not like I mean, I love chiropractor, but at the same time, it's not like, just use as an example, it's not like a chiropractor who is like, there's no end, you know? It's like, just go week after week after week after week. My goal is to empower my clients to be fulfilled and sustained, and to only seek me out when they feel like they need it. But there's not this dependency on needing me to access, you know, this deeper and more meaningful state of being. Like, they have it within themselves. So I'm all about giving other people the tools that have helped me, sharing what I know to help other people have that same realization. But it's really important to have teachers. So I don't want it to come across like, you know, these people don't matter. Master teachers and healers, they deeply matter. And having a sense of community within whatever tradition you're drawn to deeply matters as well. So that it doesn't have to be this isolated solo journey. You still want to find that community of like-minded people, but you have all that wisdom within you, you know? So it's about finding teachers who are helping you to realize that you already have those answers and are helping you to draw it out of yourself.
So that enlightenment is in everybody. They just need to unlock it, and you help them unlock it within within themselves.
Yeah.
That's amazing that you're able to like make a living off of doing that for yourself. And you've found your purpose and your passion, and you're walking in it.
For this time, yeah.
For this time,
I don't know how it will evolve. You know, I never thought that there was a lot of resistance that I had to work through, because when I first became a yoga teacher, I found myself judging myself. Like, I shouldn't be making money off of this. I felt guilty. How do I put a price to a service of healing, you know? So there was, and I know a lot of people who are new teachers and different types of energy healers and working in this realm of alternative modalities. They all have a really hard time. We have a really hard time valuing ourselves and knowing how to put a price to a service. And it's definitely, I never thought that I would do it, but I think it's because of my unattachment to being like, I have to be this thing. That has what's helped to bring certain types of success into my life. When I first moved to LA, I was talking to my godmother and, you know, just kind of asking her like how she felt about it, because for her, it was almost like she had a double life. She did all this healing work on the side. It was never the main thing. She worked in fashion. So it was like she had these two polar opposite kind of personas that she was in her life. And she told me, she was like, even if you're making 30% of your income from this work, that's a success. There's no job posting, for this sort of work. There's no like, oh, let me look up on Work Pop or these different things. Like, it doesn't exist. You kind of have to create it, but it's a process and a journey. And I feel like if you're meant to be doing this type of work, then it has to be out of a curiosity to heal yourself, and then from that you realize by keeping that information within is selfish, so you need to share it and help others. So I find for all of my friends that are really thriving doing this work, it's never been about, oh, like, I want to be a professional sound healer. It's about, I want to learn this tool, this modality to help me go deeper within myself, to create a better relationship to myself. And then the more you learn, the more you want to share, and you want to help others. You want to help other people do the same thing. So I feel like it has to really come from a genuine and authentic place, not a greedy place. So I think when I first moved to LA, I just released that attachment of like, oh, it doesn't have to be a full-time job. And I really feel that the opportunities come when you're ready. You're never given something before you're able to handle it. And so you just have to, if it's really authentic, the place that anyone's coming from doing this work, it's a lifelong journey. It's not something where it's like, I just want to make this amount of money so that I can retire by this age or be under this top 30 under 30 list, or, you have to release all of that, release expectation to outcome, and just be really present with yourself and your practice and see how it unfolds. And the fruit, you really benefit the fruit of the practice the more that you kind of lean into that.
Have you learned all this through experience?
I would say, a combination. Like, a lot of it has been through my own experience these past 8 years, and just seeing patterns. And then also through my teachers, like having those mentors that I go to is really important to help guide me along the way. I never want to lose touch of that. I never want to feel like, oh, I'm beyond, like I know it all. Mm-hmm. I know nothing, like I know nothing. I just know.
And it takes humbleness to say that too. You know what I mean? To say that because I feel like a lot of people that are professionals in their industry or whatever path they're in can oftentimes think that they know everything about that, but it takes a humble person to be able to say, I really don't know anything about this. I'm learning along the way, right? Do you ever fall into that struggle yourself, comparing yourself to other people as hard as you try not to?
It only creeps up if I spend too much time on Instagram, honestly.
Really?
I try not to really scroll, so like I will post on my page, but I don't really go on my feed or my explore. I might like visit particular friends, like I'll look up people's names and like just check up, I don't know what they've been up to, but I try not to spend time scrolling and looking at other people on the internet, because I feel just like, I don't know, watching the movie, like the Social Dilemma, and like stuff like that just kind of validated the thoughts that I already had about it all.
The way it's designed to,
exactly.
Yeah, it's very malicious the way it's designed to impact you.
To keep you addicted, and it's just not good for your mental health. So, you just have to draw boundaries around that. And I struggle with it less now. I would say when I first moved to LA, you're kind of like shown the extreme of celebrity and Hollywood and entertainment industry and all these like influencer teachers. That was so opposite of the environment that I was in when I lived in Toronto, when I was in South Africa, when I was in Arizona. It was so low key. None of my teachers had Instagram. Like it just wasn't a thing. It was not a part of it at all. It wasn't until I moved to LA that I was like a yoga influencer. I was like, what is that? Like, it was so crazy. And people caring about it. And, so it's a constant balance of like, and I've had to work on my relationship with social media as well, of just using it as a tool that works for me, not against me. So it's kind of like the ego. We have to train our ego so that it works for you, not against you. So that it's not running havoc in your brain with all these thoughts, so that you're kind of controlling your thoughts with, not controlling, but being able to decipher the difference between like what's a thought of your ego and what's a thought of your higher self or your essence or your heart. And so the same thing happens with social media. Is like we have to figure out a way to use it that serves whatever purpose you have, whatever you're trying to put out there. So for me, it's definitely more like a business tool, to help spread the word of what I do, and to also for visibility. There was a period of time where it's getting a little better now, where there's more people of color within wellness being featured and being spoken to and interviewed and that sort of thing. But there was a long time where that wasn't around, so I feel like when I first got into this industry, I never looked to magazines, I never looked to the internet or anything for inspiration, because I never saw myself reflected. So I didn't really value it. I was like, none of these people really, no one looks like me, no one looks like something I want to be doing right now. So I was very much like anti. And then I was like, okay, well, that's something for me to practice and to invite into my space and into my meditation of why are these feelings of frustration and resistance coming up when I think about social media. And so it's kind of like I've been looking in that more and more of like, all right, let me think of it like my ego. Let me use social media as a tool for spreading awareness. Let me use it as just visibility so that there can be some other person out there. I get messages from all the time, people all over the world who are people of color who are looking, just for the same practices that I do, and just being like, I Googled sound healing and I had to scroll until I finally found a person of color, and it just happened to be you doing it, So that's really the only reason why I post me doing what I do online, is because if I don't, then, who will?
Yeah, for sure. So you do a lot more producing than consuming at the end of the day. Yeah. Why do you think there is such a gap in that sense, like racially, for your industry?
Oh,
I know that's a heavy
I
question.
know, it's not heavy. It's just loaded. It's like
loaded,
how do we even begin that? I think it was mainly possibly with yoga. Originally when it was brought here, it was kind of introduced to white communities, and so it was just more so white people getting trained. And still coming from a genuine place, you know, but it was and it was all marketed. I think all the people every studio owner, for the most part, is white. Most of the teachers you see at the studio are going to be white. When you look inside wellness, yoga magazines, mostly just featuring white people. So I think it was kind of just like the ignorance of the times of people not being challenged and being told that they actually have to be inclusive. That's kind of like what this whole movement, that's how Black Lives Matter is affecting the wellness industry, is it's making the wellness industry also step up to the plate and to be more inclusive and to start hiring. There's amazing teachers of every race, but it's also making the wellness industry kind of look at its own internalized white supremacy
and take a step back.
They think, that we're spiritual and, we're not about that, but no, it's deeply affecting these businesses. So I don't know why, it wasn't just inclusive off the bat, considering these are Eastern practices that I do, so from India and Asia, or India's in Asia, but these are Eastern practices that were not created by white people, but it was. I always say I'm never mad at how someone found the practice. I'm just glad you did.
That's a great way to
so
put
I'm not upset. I'm just like, I'm happy that yoga is reaching the masses in whatever modality, even if it was a superficial reason that drew someone to want to do this. There's facial acupuncture and for like cosmetic reasons, but maybe after someone does a couple sessions of that, they'll realize, oh, I can treat my whole body, not just my face. So I don't like really bashing people and kind of their pathway and how they found the practice. It's just the practice is so much deeper than any superficial reason that someone can be drawn to it. So the more you do it, the more you'll start to realize those deeper teachings that are there, just kind of waiting.
Yeah, but it's like you said earlier, it's important for you to give somebody who's a person of color somebody to see somebody that looks like them, because it makes them feel more comfortable with at least trying it and delving into like the realm of it, right?
Yeah, and that's why I, you know, loved in the past. I loved teaching at as many studios as possible, at any studio that would take me as a teacher. You know, there'd be times where I'm teaching at like 6 different studios at the same time. Very chaotic for me, but it was just more about the deeper impact of there just being someone like me on the teaching schedule.
Yeah.
You know, where there's a lot of people who think that there's no people of color who are teachers, you know, so they're just never going to enter that space because they just want to be in an inclusive space. And so, yeah, it's just, that's why I care about kind of showing up in those spaces, because over the years I've also had some people ask, like, you know, why do you teach at a predominantly white yoga studio? And it's like, well, first of all, show me one that's not. I'm going to be out of a job. But also, like, there has to be, I have to be somewhere, you know, like people have to have a way to find me. And I just love that I can inspire more people to be curious and to feel safe and confident about going into these spaces when it's, you know, when they're practicing with me.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's awesome that you do it too. And I think that it could potentially even, and I talked to Verissa, we talked about Verissa a little bit off air as well. And we talked about the topic of just like, there not being just stigmas with having female and male photographers. And we talked similarly about the fact that she's doing it is inspiring other up-and-coming female photographers and letting them know that they could do it at the same level that she's doing it. And I relate that to your journey and your path, because you can potentially inspire people that are of color, people that are women that want to get into the industry because they see somebody like them doing it. And I love that, and I love that you're doing that. And I hope that does happen, whether somebody's watching it or just...
It happens. I mean,
yeah.
I'm an open book, so it's like, if someone DMs me and I answer all and any questions, anything, like I'm so happy to share information, to share resources, to share tools, to share places that I studied. You know, I want more and more people of color to get into this work. You know, it's so important for us to have alternative healing modalities, especially in this time that we're in with all of the chaos that's going on, especially racially within the world. You know, like, I really feel like the only reason why I've been able to stay sane and grounded and to release all of the things that we're processing collectively is because of the practice. You know, it's a tool that it's a way of being, and it's a living practice. It's not something that just lives in the room when you're doing a class. You know, the practice really begins when you get off your mat, when you get off your cushion, when you go into the world. That's when the practice begins. Can you take it into your environment? Can you take it into your daily life? And that's the constant work.
Yeah, I think a caveat too to what happened last year, or what we're still experiencing now with the pandemic, is that a lot of people probably sought healing practices during that time because mental health was such an issue that once things are like not done, but once we're obviously like starting to head out of this at whatever rate. So I think that like we'll look back at this time as people like gaining something from it in that sense, where they were seeking healing practices, and now like maybe they'll take that with them moving forward, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's kind of opened up it's a constant theme that we see in a lot of people's journey, is that we don't really lead and find these practices until we're going through a moment of suffering, until an experience has brought us to our knees where we feel we have no other way to turn.
Yeah.
And so, you know, this pandemic, everything going on with racial injustice, and all of the other areas in the world, environment, animals, you know, like these things that deeply matter. I'm just very grateful that we're being forced to find another way, and that, you know, the more all of these areas that we want to see change in the world, I firmly believe will happen at a faster rate the more and more people turn to these practices. You know, that there's a reason why so many people, like, they'll they'll start a practice, and then it's almost like 2 years later, you're like, I don't even recognize that friend anymore. You know, like, who are they? They were so different a few years ago. Like, who is this person? The teachings are so powerful, and the dedication and devotion to them over time kind of unlocks your ability to have compassion and to feel for things that are outside of yourself and to feel for things that are greater than you. And so we have to do these practices to have those realizations so that we care about the planet, you know, so that we care about animals, so that we care about reducing our impact or reducing the amount of suffering that we personally contribute to the planet. That's a big part of the practice as well.
Yeah, this is so awesome. I'm learning so much from you right now. And like a lot of the times I feel like it's more conversational, but I'm doing so much listening right now because I'm so interested in your perspective on these various topics that we're talking about, that like I'm almost like taking in what you're saying, and it's just like, it's amazing. Yeah. So I appreciate you taking the time to explain all of this, because I'm getting a lot out of it for sure.
That makes me so happy.
Yeah. What plans do you have for yourself moving forward? As far as your path in your career, is there any like any heights or new plateaus that you want to reach for yourself?
I have a really interesting relationship to goals. So
Okay.
every time I set a goal, it doesn't really happen. The most amazing moments in my life have been just through alignment and right timing. So my only goal in life is to be in alignment with myself. And through that, I feel like what's meant to find me, what's seeking me will find me, you know? So I don't really, and my mom is a coach. So it
Like
kills
a life
her.
coach?
Yeah.
Okay.
She different coach. She life coaching, executive coaching, leadership development. She coaches Olympic athlete coaches. So she's like the coach's coach as
Wow.
well. She used to be a gymnast back in the day. So, you know, it drives her crazy that I'm like, I don't know, here's my 2-year plan, my 5-year plan, like, here are all my goals. Like, I know there's a lot of people who connect to like writing everything down and like really visualizing it. For me, I don't want to manifest things from my ego, you know, like I really feel like God's plan, the divine plan, is the best plan that's out there for me. And I don't want to get in the way of that. So my practice is all about getting out of my own way and to just allow life to unfold in the way that it's perfectly meant to. But I have to make sure that my vessel is clean. I have to make sure that I'm, you know, taken care of in alignment, that I'm in a constant state of healing and growth and development. And through that, you know, all of these opportunities and experiences that I've had in my life found me. You know, I didn't really seek it out. Like I performed as a singing bowl soloist at the Hollywood Bowl.
Really?
You know, yeah, and with the Los Angeles Philharmonic. And it's just like celebrating America's anniversary in space. It's like, how could that's never anything I would have visualized.
Yeah.
You know, I wouldn't have written down like, I didn't even think that was possible, you know? So I already can recognize the ways in which my own thinking in terms of what I think is possible is limited, because I'm constantly being thrown and given these opportunities and experiences that go beyond what I ever thought would be possible for someone like me. You
Okay.
know?
Yeah. How does that relate though with like manifesting something? You know what I mean? Because is there a fine line between having a goal and manifesting something to happen for yourself?
Well, the human mind is so powerful. So what we think, we become, and if we think it's real, it is. And, you know, there's so much power with that, but a lot of times it's not used for good. A lot of times it's used for selfish purposes. Mm-hmm. And so, I don't know, I have like conflicting feelings, because it's like, I want people to feel empowered, you know? So if manifestation and, you know, vision boards and, you know, writing things down is healing and uplifting for you, that's great. But we also need to go beyond that, because having that powerful realization that what you think you become, what you write down is, it has to go beyond the ego. It can't just stick to the self, because that's this mess that we're in right now in this world. It's capitalism, it's selfishness, and it's every man for himself. and it's care about how we not leaving the place better than we found it, And so that's my only, I don't like to overemphasize that part, because I want people to be connected to a higher power, a source that is greater than themselves. And when you're tapped into that space, the ideas and the inspiration that follow are usually about serving in some type of way, of having a deeper purpose,
Yeah.
So creating a why behind what you're doing, a why behind what you're manifesting. But it's kind of like yoga. Sometimes people start yoga because they just think they want to get fit. They're like, I want a yoga body, I want to be, strong. The more they do the practice, they start to fall in love with meditation more and the deeper healing benefits of it.
Yeah. So they came in with one intention and they uncovered a different intention, and that's what makes them stick with it.
Exactly. So with manifestation, it's like, it's the ego's curiosity that wants it, and that is drawn to that practice. But ideally and hopefully over time, we start realizing that we don't have to control everything, like we don't have to control we don't have to have so much control, Miracles happen when we release that expectation to outcome, not trying to contrive results, because what's meant for another person isn't necessarily meant for you, So I see a lot of people who will put things like a car or like a house or, like
on a
just
vision board.
just very, it's
materialistic.
There's a fine line of it just breeding more materialism. But I do feel like it also might lead, hopefully, to someone realizing that they should use this power of thought for serving humanity in some way.
Yeah, that's a really interesting perspective on it. Never really heard this perspective on it before. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And so many methods work different for different people. Like sometimes writing goals down works for people in a different way that leads to them to things like you said. And I think that you're so in line with yourself, and you've had so many years of experience where you're able to think the way that you do, that like this conversation is going to make me think differently about a lot of things that I think about moving forward. You know what I mean? And if somebody's listening or watching, I'm sure they can take something away from it as well. So I really appreciate
Amazing.
it.
And it doesn't happen overnight either. Like that's the other thing, is there's so much pressure for overnight success. There's so much pressure to be like as rich as young as possible.
Which is amplified by social media too.
It really is. It's this really weird obsession. And so, we have to kind of like get away from that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's not what it's all about, like we have to, get back to basics, get back to simplicity, sustainability, and sharing, and, helping other people out.
For sure. Is there anything that you want to say that you haven't said yet, like a lasting message to the audience?
Last message. So one of my favorite quotes is by this Zen Buddhist teacher named Adyashanti, and it's, "As we expand, life becomes simple."
As we expand, life becomes simple.
So sometimes, we think that when I get to this level of success, when I get to this place that I think I need to be at in my life, I'm going to have all of those feelings inside. I'm going to have self-worth. I'm going to have love. I'm going to have joy. I'm going to have happiness. But you didn't need all of those things to have those qualities that are already inside of you. So my main thing is about, don't get to your deathbed. Don't get to the end of your life to realize that you lived it for someone else, that you lived it for someone else's expectation of what life should be. I think about monks and nuns all the time, how they release every material possession, to find this deeper alignment with God. And what do we do when we die? If we have anything, we have to assign it away.
Yeah, in a will.
So, in a will, or if you don't, then the government assigns it to themselves. So either way, you know, at a certain point, all of this stuff, you're going to have to give it up. You know, it doesn't go with you into, you know, the unmanifest part of you, or doesn't go into the non-physical part of you. So that's something that I want people to think about, is just our attachment to the things that are around us, and to shed, you know, to strip all the things, strip away all the things that we think we need to be happy and to be successful, because in one way or another, it's going to be released for us.
Yeah.
So either you're going to release it or fate's going to release it. It's going to happen.
Yeah. I'd definitely rather be in control of that for sure myself. All right. Awesome. We're going to end on that. Thalia, again, this was amazing. Thank you so much. I learned a plethora of new skills and just new ways of thinking that I'm going to take with me moving forward. So much love. I appreciate it.
Amazing.
All right. With that, this is Levi, Thalia, checking out from Ambiance podcast. Peace.